Hi everyone and welcome to this quick settings guide for P3D version 5.3. In this video I'll run you through the settings that I use to get the best balance between graphics and performance in the new version of the sim. I've tested these settings in a range of scenarios using different aircraft at various airports, especially ones with large performance impacts like Aerosoft London Heathrow and FlyTampa Amsterdam. My PC specs are high end, so just keep that in mind while watching the video. I use the Nvidia GeForce RTX 2080 GPU, the Intel i7-9700K CPU overclocked at 5 GHz, plus 32 GB of RAM. My monitor is 1440p 144Hz. You can see what add-ons I use in the description of this video, as well as all my other videos. With that all said, let's jump straight into it. So to start off with, let's look at the traffic section. This really impacts performance quite heavily depending on what you set it to. I use AIG AI Traffic in the sim. I have this set at 10% for busy airports like London Heathrow. It has a really big FPS impact, so I put it down, as I said, for busy airports to about 10%, although for less busy airports I put it up to maybe like 20 or 25% if I can. Now this freeways only or all roads section over here is a new feature in version 5.3. I have it set to freeways only because that increases my FPS by about 10 from my testing, and road vehicles over here at 10 is also a good setting because, you don't need any more than that. These ships and ferries and leisure boats doesn't affect performance at all, really. Now let's take a look at the display section. The image and text quality section over here is really crucial when it comes to FPS as well as VRAM usage. I have FXAA disabled because it doesn't look good and also impacts performance. Anti-aliasing here is at 4 times SSAA because it looks better than MSAA, and my system can handle it without much of an impact on performance. Text filtering's at the maximum here because there's no performance impact, so you might as well put it at the maximum. Text resolution does affect VRAM usage a lot, especially at sceneries like Latin VFR Miami, which don't work, basically at all for me with anything higher than medium here. Plus there's no major visual difference between medium and high. MIP map VC panels is on, as well as the 2D transparency here at 0, and that really improves the sort of clarity and sharpness of your cockpit displays. Motion blur is a new feature in version 5.3. I don't know why, but if I turn it off, I get like 15 FPS slower, so, just keep it on. Moving on to the world section here, which is where I lose most of my frames, but gain more graphic and scenery improvements. Level of detail radius here is something that I compensate with to, save frames with not much of a visual difference. Everything else for terrain is basically maxed out, or is maxed out, to get the most out of, meshes and terrain textures, especially, I use the OpenLCs and all that. It's really noticeable on like tall mountains, if you have a mesh that's really detailed. So yeah, keep that all maxed out. Scenery objects is another area where I could game frames if I reduce some things here, but I prefer to have more detailed scenery. Being on final approach over large cities like London, LA, New York, etc. looks so much better with dense buildings. Likewise, approaches over dense forests, look a lot better with dense vegetation. Autogen scenery draw distance is a complete FPS killer though. I have it set to very high, which is the maximum that my setup can handle. However, if you're having problems with FPS, try reducing this. Any higher and my frames would just be unplayable. I don't like how, at lower settings than very high here, the area that isn't loaded is really close and visible. It looks bad and too obvious if you ask me. But if you need FPS, then this might be worth reducing. Road lights is a new feature that was added in version 5.2, I believe, to improve night lighting of roads. Putting this at dense is too much of an FPS hit for me, but does look better. Definitely do not use dynamic 3D autogen vegetation. It looks really just unrealistic and weird because it makes the trees a sort of bright neon green. So just keep that off. Water detail is at high. To be honest, I haven't really changed this setting for a long time. But, high is a good balance, I think. It looks good, but you don't need anything higher than that, to be honest. I have bathymetry disabled here because it does have a noticeable FPS impact, which is why I don't have it on. Reflections, clouds and user vehicle, it's basically all you need. Terrain doesn't look good, just looks a bit weird. Special effects are both set to medium. I think the parallel 42 immersions require these to be at or over medium, Anyway, so, keep these here just as a balance between visuals and performance. Putting them at high does kill a few frames with little visual difference. Now, the weather section over here is very important. I use enhanced atmospherics and volumetric clouds, but you might use Rex or ENVSHADE for your clouds. In version 5.2, I had this all the way at ultra, but after testing in 5.3, I've been able to, increase my FPS by about 5, so an extra 5 FPS by decreasing this to high. I don't gain any more FPS by putting it down to medium, but the draw distance is noticeably lower. So, keep it at high, that works for me. Amortize clouds is checked. For some reason, if I turn it off, I get like 10 FPS lower, so, I keep it on. Finally, onto the lighting section. My HDR settings are pretty much default, except for the brightness being at 1.1. I just feel like P3D used to be a bit too dark, so that's why I put it at 1.1. Of course, I use Reshade with the Lucas Cavatoni preset, as well as ENVSHADE. My ENVSHADE settings should be on the screen about now. Moving on, dynamic reflections do have a small impact on FPS, so I have them set to medium, which gives a good amount of detail without sacrificing too much performance. Putting this on ultra, for example, reduces my FPS by about 5, so not really worth it. Shadow quality is also really important for performance. Since I started testing in version 5.3, I realized that for some reason in version 5.2 I never had simulation objects, cast and receive, enabled. This means airport buildings, AI planes, lampposts, and other custom objects in airports or for city sceneries like just Jackie Design, New York. All of these will cast and receive shadows. It looks completely unrealistic with this off, so now I have it turned on. Of course, there's a performance impact for this. I lose about 5 FPS by having it on, as well as the shadow draw distance being at ultra, but it is worth it for the visuals in my opinion. Reducing the draw distance to medium or low does save FPS though. So now that I've gone through my P3D settings, I'll briefly show you my Nvidia control panel settings. I haven't changed anything here except 2 things. Power management is set to prefer maximum performance, which just sort of squeezes out all the potential that my GPU has, make sure I'm really maximizing that performance. And texture filtering quality is set to high quality. Again, just to, it's going to be better than the default option, so might as well. So that brings us to the end of the video. Just keep in mind that the settings that I've shown you here are aiming for the best performance as well as the best graphics. If you're watching this to try and fine-tune your sim to the best settings, just remember that you need to adjust, test, and keep doing that till you find the best settings for your system. Hopefully this video has helped you out. Make sure to subscribe for more videos, and of course, thanks for watching.